What happens when a woman who has built her entire life on turning pain into art finally refuses to turn away from it? Live on television, under the glare of studio lights, with nowhere left to hide. Before we go any further, if you love cinematic, emotional celebrity moments that pull you inside the room, subscribe to the Narration Show right now, hit like, and tell us in the comments what you think happens when truth collides with daytime television. Your support keeps these stories alive. The applause came first. It always did. Warm, practiced, rising on cue as Lady Gaga stepped onto the set of The View. She moved with controlled grace, not the explosive energy fans expected from stadium stages, but something quieter. Heavier. She wore black, simple, structured, almost protective. No outrageous silhouette. No shock value. Just fabric and posture, like armor stripped down to its barest form. Her smile appeared on instinct, trained by years of red carpets and flashing cameras, but it faded quickly once she took her seat. Her eyes drifted across the studio audience, then briefly toward the panel. Whoopi sat back, unreadable. Sunny adjusted her papers. Joy Behar leaned forward slightly, chin tilted, lips already curled into a knowing smile. This was supposed to be a conversation. Promotion. Reflection. Healing. That's what the press release said. But the room felt wrong. The studio lights burned hot, reflecting off the glossy table between them. Gaga folded her hands together, fingers interlaced tight enough to whiten her knuckles. She inhaled slowly, grounding herself, the way she had learned to do years ago. Not for stage fright, but for survival. Joy Behar broke the ice with ease, her voice casual, friendly. "It's always great to have you here," she said. "You're such a force. A survivor. A role model." Gaga nodded politely. "Thank you," she replied softly. "That means a lot." The conversation began gently. Mental health. Advocacy. Her foundation. Gaga spoke carefully, choosing her words with precision. She talked about compassion, about listening, about the importance of not simplifying pain into sound bites. The audience murmured approval. Heads nodded. Everything was smooth. Too smooth. Joy listened, tapping her pen lightly against the table. Then she smiled again, this time sharper. "But," she said, drawing the word out just long enough to change the temperature in the room, "some people feel that celebrities like you sometimes exaggerate personal struggles. That trauma becomes part of the brand. What do you say to critics who think that?" The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was uncomfortable. Gaga blinked once. Twice. Her shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. Somewhere deep inside her chest, something tightened. She had heard versions of this question before, online in comments, in think pieces written by people who had never sat in her skin for a single second. But hearing it here, framed this way, delivered with a smile, felt different. It felt personal. "I don't think pain is a marketing strategy," Gaga said slowly. Her voice was calm, but lower now. More grounded. "I think pain is something you either survive, or you don't." Joy raised her eyebrows. "Sure, but you've spoken about trauma extensively. Some viewers wonder if constantly revisiting it keeps people stuck." A murmur rippled through the audience. Gaga's jaw tightened. She glanced down at her hands, then back up. The cameras caught the shift, the way her eyes darkened, the way her posture straightened, as if she were bracing against an unseen force. "Talking about trauma doesn't keep you stuck," she said. "Pretending it didn't happen does." Joy chuckled lightly. "Well, that's one way to look at it." That chuckle landed like a slap. For a brief moment, Gaga said nothing. The room held its breath. The audience sensed it, the shift from interview to confrontation. This was no longer about promotion. This was about something older, deeper. "You know," Gaga said finally, her voice trembling just enough to reveal the effort it took to keep it steady. "When you reduce someone's survival to exaggeration, you're telling every person watching who's been hurt that their pain is inconvenient." Joy leaned back slightly. "I'm just asking questions. And I'm answering honestly," Gaga replied. "Because honesty saved my life." The applause that followed was hesitant, scattered. Some clapped. Some didn't. Joy smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "Well," she said, "not everyone has the luxury of turning their struggles into art." The words hung there. Luxury. The camera cut to Gaga's face, and for the first time, the mask cracked. Her lips parted slightly, as if she hadn't expected that word. As if it had unlocked something she'd been holding shut for years. Her breath caught. She swallowed. "Luxury?" she repeated quietly. Her voice dropped, not in volume, but in weight. every syllable pressed down on the room. I was assaulted, Gaga said. I was hospitalized. I lived with chronic pain, so severe I couldn't stand on a stage some nights. That wasn't luxury. The studio froze. Joy's smile vanished. Whoopi shifted in her seat. Sunny looked down at the table. The audience fell completely silent. I didn't turn trauma into art, Gaga continued, her eyes glistening now. Art is what kept me alive when trauma tried to take everything else. Her hands trembled just slightly. She clenched them together again, fighting for control. Joy opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she had no immediate response. And when I talk about it, Gaga said, her voice cracking now, I do it so someone at home, someone who thinks they're broken beyond repair, knows they're not alone. A woman in the audience wiped her eyes. Another nodded, lips pressed together tightly. The tension was no longer subtle. It was thick, heavy, pressing against every surface of the studio. This wasn't daytime TV anymore. This was raw, unfiltered humanity colliding with skepticism in real time. Joy finally spoke. I didn't mean to minimize. But you did, Gaga interrupted gently but firmly. And that's why it matters. The interruption stunned everyone. Gaga rarely interrupted anyone. She always played polite, diplomatic. But not today. Not now. The cameras zoomed in. The moment stretched, fragile and electric. Gaga sat taller now, her fear transformed into something sharper. Purposeful. This isn't about me, she said. It's about how easily we dismiss pain when it makes us uncomfortable. Joy crossed her arms, defensive. I think you're taking this too personally. A breath passed between them. I am personal about it, Gaga replied. Because it nearly killed me. The audience erupted into applause, loud this time. Sustained. Emotional. The kind that doesn't come from cue cards, but from recognition. Joy looked out at the crowd, then back at Gaga, her expression hard to read. The producers were already panicking backstage. This was going off script. Way off. And this was only the beginning. Because Lady Gaga wasn't finished speaking. And Joy Behar wasn't ready for what came next. The applause lingered longer than anyone expected, rolling through the studio like a wave that refused to break. Lady Gaga sat still as it washed over her, eyes fixed forward, chest rising and falling in slow, measured breaths. She wasn't basking in it. She was steadying herself. The kind of steadiness you learn only after being knocked down too many times to count. Joy Behar let the clapping fade before speaking again. Her voice returned lighter, almost joking, but the edge underneath hadn't disappeared. Well, she said, we didn't expect therapy hour today. A few nervous laughs fluttered through the audience. Nervous, because they sensed it too, that this wasn't something you joked your way out of. Gaga turned her head slowly toward Joy. There was no anger in her eyes now. Something else had replaced it. Resolve. This isn't therapy, Gaga said. This is reality. And reality doesn't pause just because it's inconvenient for a show rundown. The words landed hard. Whoopi leaned forward slightly. Let's take a breath, she said calmly, trying to regain control of the table. We're having an important conversation. Gaga nodded respectfully toward Whoopi, but her focus never fully left Joy. The connection between them felt charged, like a wire pulled too tight. Joy sighed, waving a hand. Look, nobody's denying you've been through things. I'm just saying that sometimes audiences get tired of hearing celebrities talk about their pain when regular people don't get that platform. That was the moment something shifted completely. Gaga's lips pressed together. She looked down again, but this time not in retreat. This time, it was like she was gathering something, memories, emotions, years of swallowed responses. When she looked back up, her eyes shone, but her voice was steady. Regular people, she repeated. You mean the people who stop me on the street and whisper their stories to me because they're ashamed to say them out loud? The audience stilled again. You mean the teenagers who tell me they didn't end their lives because a song made them feel seen? Gaga continued. Those regular people? Joy shifted in her seat. I didn't say that. But that's what it sounds like, Gaga said gently. And words matter. There was no yelling. No theatrics. That was what made it so powerful. Gaga wasn't performing outrage. She was speaking from a place so raw it left no room for exaggeration. When I speak, she went on, I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm offering language to people who don't have any yet. Sunny Hostin finally looked up. Joy, she said carefully. I think what she's saying is. Joy cut in. I understand what she's saying. I just don't agree that revisiting trauma publicly is always healthy. That sentence, so neat, so clinical, felt like a door slamming shut. Gaga's breath hitched. For a split second, the composure faltered. Her shoulders trembled, barely perceptible, but the cameras caught it. Millions would see it later. The moment before the tears. Do you know what's unhealthy? Gaga asked softly. Silence. Her voice broke on the word. When I was silent, she said, blinking hard, I was dying. A collective inhale swept through the studio. Someone in the audience gasped. Another whispered, oh my God. Joy opened her mouth again, but Gaga continued, the dam finally cracking. I smiled through interviews. I performed through pain so intense my body locked up. I told myself it was easier to be the joke than the problem, she said. And every time someone told me to move on, to stop talking, to stop making people uncomfortable, I disappeared a little more. Tears slid down her cheeks now, unchecked. She didn't wipe them away. But I'm still here, she said. Because I chose to speak. The room felt suspended, like time had slowed just enough for everyone to feel the weight of her words. Even Joy had gone quiet, her posture rigid, her expression conflicted. Whoopi placed her hands flat on the table. This is bigger than TV, she said quietly. Gaga nodded. Exactly. Joy cleared her throat. I'm not trying to silence anyone, she said. I just think there's a fine line between advocacy and discomfort? Gaga finished for her. Joy hesitated. Yes. Gaga leaned forward now, elbows resting lightly on the table. Her voice lowered, intimate, like she was speaking to one person instead of millions. Discomfort is where change starts, she said. And if my honesty makes people uncomfortable, maybe that discomfort is doing its job. The applause erupted again, louder than before. This time it wasn't just support, it was relief. Like the audience had been holding something in and finally exhaled. Joy shook her head slightly. I think you're projecting a lot onto a simple question. Gaga smiled faintly through tears. Not a happy smile. A sad one. It was never a simple question to me, she said. Because my life is the answer. That line cut through the room like glass. For the first time since the conversation began, Joy looked genuinely unsettled. She glanced toward the camera, then back at Gaga, as if suddenly aware of how exposed she was. Well, Joy said, trying to regain control, we all have our perspectives. Yes, Gaga agreed. And some perspectives come from surviving. The audience stood. Not all at once, but enough that it mattered. A spontaneous standing ovation, raw and unplanned. The producers didn't cue it. They couldn't stop it. Gaga looked out at them, overwhelmed. Her hand flew to her mouth. She shook her head slightly, as if to say, this isn't about me. But it was. And it wasn't. As the clapping thundered, Joy remained seated. Her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her face unreadable. When the applause finally faded, the energy in the studio had changed permanently. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was a reckoning. Gaga wiped her cheeks, inhaled deeply, and looked directly into the camera. If one person watching feels less alone, she said, voice steady again, then this moment matters. The camera cut to Joy, who forced a small smile. We'll take a break, she said. But everyone knew no commercial break could reset what had just happened. And when the show returned, the tension would only deepen. Because the hardest truths hadn't even been spoken yet. The red light above the camera flicked off, and for the first time in what felt like hours, the studio exhaled. The word commercial echoed faintly through the speakers, but the tension didn't leave with it. It clung to the air, heavy and unresolved, like smoke after a fire. Lady Gaga remained in her chair, shoulders slightly hunched now, hands folded tightly in her lap. Without the cameras rolling, her strength didn't vanish, but the effort behind it became visible. She stared at the table for a moment, eyes unfocused, breathing slow, deliberate. Joy Behar leaned back, crossing her arms. Her jaw was set. She wasn't smiling anymore. Whoopi turned toward Gaga first. You okay? She asked quietly off mic. Gaga nodded once. Yeah, she said. I just needed to say it. Sunny reached out and briefly touched Gaga's arm. It was powerful, she whispered. Across the table, Joy shifted in her seat. It didn't have to go that far, she muttered, not quite under her breath. Gaga looked up. Sometimes, Gaga said calmly, truth goes exactly as far as it needs to. Joy scoffed softly. Or as far as emotions take it. That sentence reignited everything. Gaga straightened again. Emotions don't make truth invalid, she said. They're often the evidence. A producer hurried over, crouching near the table. We're back in 30 seconds, she whispered urgently. Let's keep it light. Gaga almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how impossible it sounded. 30 seconds later, the red light snapped back on. And the mask was back, on everyone. Joy smiled brightly at the camera. Welcome back, she said, her voice upbeat. We're continuing our conversation with Lady Gaga. The audience applauded again, but it felt different now. Less automatic. More intentional. Joy turned toward Gaga, her smile thinning. I want to clarify something, she said. No one here is questioning your pain. But don't you think constantly reliving trauma in public risks defining you by it? Gaga didn't answer immediately. She glanced toward the audience, toward the camera, toward millions of people watching from couches, hospital beds, dorm rooms, and bedrooms where the lights stayed off longer than they should. I was defined by trauma long before I ever spoke about it, Gaga said finally. I just didn't have control of the narrative. Joy tilted her head. But isn't it healthier to move on? Gaga's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in focus. Moving on doesn't mean pretending it never happened, she said. It means carrying it honestly. The audience murmured again. Joy pressed forward. Some might argue that revisiting these stories keeps wounds open. Gaga nodded. Some wounds need air, she said. Covering them is what causes infection. That metaphor landed hard. Joy's lips parted, then closed again. For a split second, she looked caught off guard. But she recovered quickly. I just think there's a difference between healing and, she paused, searching for the word, performing pain. That was it. The room shifted instantly. Even before Gaga spoke, everyone felt it, the crossing of a line. Gaga's face went still. Completely still. The tears were gone now, replaced by something colder. Sharper. Performance is what I do on stage, she said quietly. Survival is what I'm talking about. Joy shrugged slightly. To some people, it looks the same. Gaga inhaled deeply. When she spoke again, her voice was low, controlled, and devastating. Then some people have never had to survive. A gasp rippled through the audience. Joy stiffened. That's not fair. No, Gaga agreed. But it's honest. The silence that followed was thick enough to press against the walls. I didn't choose trauma, Gaga continued. I didn't choose pain. And I didn't choose to need years of therapy just to feel safe in my own body. She leaned forward again, eyes locked on Joy now. But I did choose to stop being ashamed of it. The applause exploded, loud, emotional, sustained. People stood again, some wiping their faces, others clapping with hands held high. Joy looked out at the audience, visibly unsettled. She hadn't anticipated this. Not the depth of reaction. Not the way the crowd had aligned so clearly. Well, Joy said, her tone tightening, this is certainly passionate. Gaga didn't look away. It's personal, she said. And personal doesn't need permission. Whoopi finally stepped in, her voice firm. All right, she said. Let's ground this. We're not here to invalidate anyone's experience. Gaga nodded respectfully. I'm not asking anyone to agree with me, she said. I'm asking them to listen. Joy exhaled sharply. I hear you, she said. I just don't share the same approach. That's okay, Gaga replied. But questioning someone's survival isn't an approach. It's a judgment. That sentence landed like a verdict. The studio went quiet again. Even the camera operators seemed to hesitate, holding the shot just a beat longer than usual. Joy opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she had nothing ready. Gaga turned toward the audience, her voice softening. If you're watching this and wondering if your story is too much, too heavy, too uncomfortable, she said. It isn't. A woman in the front row nodded through tears. Your pain doesn't need to be tidy to be real, Gaga continued. And you don't owe anyone's silence to make them comfortable. The applause returned, gentler this time, but deeply felt. Joy finally spoke, her voice quieter now. We're going to have to wrap soon. Gaga looked back at her. Thank you for letting me speak. Joy hesitated, then nodded. Of course. But the tension between them remained, unresolved, visible, undeniable. Because this wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a moment that would be replayed, debated, dissected. And what came next, after the cameras shut off for good, would turn this confrontation into something far bigger than a daytime TV exchange. The fallout was only beginning. The final applause came softer, uncertain, as the closing music of The View began to play. The camera pulled back. The red light dimmed. And just like that, it was over. At least, that's what it looked like on television. In the studio, the air still felt charged, as if the words spoken hadn't yet found a place to land. Lady Gaga sat for a moment longer, eyes fixed on the table, hands resting flat now, no longer clenched. She exhaled deeply, the kind of breath you take when you've crossed a point of no return. Joy Behar stood up first. She adjusted her jacket, nodded briefly toward the audience, and offered Gaga a polite, professional smile. "Good luck with everything," she said. It wasn't warm. It wasn't cruel. It was distant. Gaga rose slowly. "Thank you," she replied. Her voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable finality to it. Whoopi stepped in, wrapping Gaga in a quick, protective hug. "You said what needed to be said," she murmured. Gaga nodded, her eyes glistening again, not with pain this time, but with release. As Gaga exited the stage, the audience broke into applause once more. Not for the show. For her. A standing ovation that followed her all the way to the wings. She paused just before disappearing behind the curtain and turned back, pressing her hand to her heart. And then she was gone. Backstage, producers spoke in hushed tones. Phones were already out. Screens already lit. Social media was moving faster than anyone could keep up with. Did you see Joy's face? She didn't back down. That wasn't an interview. That was a reckoning. Within minutes, clips flooded the internet. Short segments. Close-ups. The moment Gaga said luxury. The moment she said survival. The moment the audience stood. Hashtags began to trend before the episode had even finished airing on the West Coast. Hashtag I survived. Hashtag Lady Gaga speaks. Hashtag the view moment. By the time Gaga reached her car, her phone was vibrating nonstop. Messages from fans. From fellow artists. From survivors who had never spoken publicly before. One message stood out. Simple. Unpolished. "Thank you for saying what I've never been brave enough to say." Gaga stared at the screen, tears slipping down her cheeks. Not because she was hurt, but because she knew, without question, that speaking had mattered. Meanwhile, the response to Joy Behar was immediate and divided. Some defended her, calling it a tough but necessary question. Others accused her of dismissiveness, of crossing a line that couldn't be unseen. Media outlets dissected every frame, every word, every pause. Headlines followed. Lady Gaga shuts down Joy Behar in emotional TV moment. Audience stunned as Gaga reclaims her narrative on The View. Daytime TV collides with raw truth. Joy addressed it the next day briefly. "Conversations can be uncomfortable," she said. "That doesn't mean they aren't worth having." But viewers noticed what she didn't say. She didn't apologize. And Gaga didn't need her to. Because the conversation had already moved beyond the studio. In interviews that followed, Gaga didn't attack. She didn't escalate. She simply stood firm. "I spoke my truth," she said. "And I stand by it." Fans rallied. Survivors shared stories. Therapists weighed in. Educators played the clip in classrooms. It became more than viral. It became reference. A moment when pain wasn't packaged. When silence wasn't rewarded. When a woman refused to make herself smaller for the comfort of a room. Weeks later, the clip was still circulating. Still sparking debate. Still reaching people who needed it at exactly the right time. And somewhere, someone watching for the first time felt less alone. That's how moments like this live on. Not in ratings, not in arguments, but in quiet rooms where someone finally feels seen. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Lady Gaga was right to speak so openly on live television? Did Joy Behar cross a line? Or ask a necessary question? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more cinematic, emotional, and explosive celebrity moments like this, subscribe to the Narration Show right now. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and stay with us, because the stories that shake the room are the ones worth telling.